Hello everybody, my name is Laxspike and welcome back to the final third part of our Fire Emblem Fates skill ranking. It has been a long journey, emphasis on the long, and Zoran and I are finally ready to knock out the Nohrian promoted class skills and get this thing to an end. It's been a lot of fun doing it, but I think we both are happy that it's over with now because this has taken, it's been a lot of setting stuff up, making sure that we can get together, so occasionally canceling it, postponing, just a bunch of nonsense. So I'm ready to, I have a lot of energy, I'm ready to get this party on the road.
Yep, happy to be here and getting it over with.
Yeah, alright. This is, the Nohrian skills are, this is going to be a bit of a, I have a feeling it's going to have a lot of decisive results because these skills are all either really good or really garbage, but, so, I think I think I mentioned last time the top 11 skills haven't changed, but maybe we'll finally see that happen this time. Alright, actually, before we started, I wanted to actually discuss something with you. I've had some reasonable arguments raised for some slight movements. It's really just one thing, but I thought about it for a while, and I did somewhat agree with it, and that is Heartseeker. A couple of my friends, we were talking, and we were why is Heartseeker in meta defining? Because I mean, I love Heartseeker. I think it's a great skill, but later, the reason that we don't have certain blow all the way up here is because we also said, you know, there are other ways that are there are other easy, consistent, reliable ways that you can increase your accuracy later on in the game. And in the early game, the 20 hit, the 20 hit that you grant to yourself and your allies is really good. But in the late game, again, even in the mid game, there's not that many bosses that you're going to be using it against. Aside from Kotaro, who's definitely going to be somebody that you're going to need to use Heartseeker against, unless you're using the bow user. Other than that, I don't really see too much of a use for Heartseeker in the mid to late game. So I was considering bumping Heartseeker down to the top of Always Worthwhile because I just don't think it can hang with these skills up here, honestly.
Yeah, I can see that. It does work out really nicely because it's a level 1 unpromoted skill. You can get it real fast, and you have it from basically the beginning as soon as you have Odin and then Nyx. But you could drop it down to the top of Always Worthwhile, and I think that's reasonable too.
Mm-hmm. I think the reason that I'm not putting it in meta, that I don't want to put it in meta defining is because these skills right here are going to be always extremely important for the entire game. You're not gonna just until you get like a fair skill, you're not gonna be dumping elbow. You're not gonna be dropping strong riposte on an enemy face build. You're not gonna be dropping quick draw on your player face build. But with Heartseeker, if there's a better skill, then you're probably you have a lot of ways to justify dropping Heartseeker for something that might be more valuable to you, and just making up the difference by having access to a lot of stat stacking. So I just wanted to explain it a little bit before we dropped it to the top of Always Worthwhile.
Yeah, I do struggle to think of a situation where I would end up dropping Heartseeker. I mean, there's some, but it's like super ridiculous high investment. I went and got all of the most ridiculous skill combinations. From that perspective, I wouldn't say that Heartseeker shouldn't belong in the club with those other things, but I do agree that it doesn't fundamentally change your approach to the game in the way that jumping around from Cavalier to Merc or Wyvern Rider to Merc or vice versa or something can do for you.
Yeah, and also I think, these skills still have their impact felt later on you get, because +4 damage dealt on player phase. You can still feel that +4 damage even once you even on chapter 25, chapter 26, chapter 23. +20 hit, you can't really always feel the impact that has on your units as you approach the late game.
Yeah, depending. I actually do want to talk about that note a little bit. I think some people approach Fates from the perspective of what you need is you need your top units to get to exactly the right benchmarks to kill enemies in 2 hits and double them. And that does work, but there is still an advantage to having overkill damage on top of that. And that's primarily in dual strikes. You can there are scary formations in Conquest. So even if you've got an awesome enemy phase unit, sometimes you want them to just go kill something and then dual strike off of them. And if they're hitting for like 60 damage, 30 damage on a dual strike, then that makes it really, really easy to clean up some of those difficult enemy formations that they may not be able to handle just by enemy phasing them all the time.
Alright, I don't have any other changes that I want to make to this list. If you have anything you want to raise up, this would be the time.
Not really. I mean, I think we had our disagreements, but I don't have anything that I really feel strongly about. So.
I mean, I still feel strongly about Certain Blow, but I mean, I think we settled that dispute amicably, and I think it's fair to put it where it is.
Okay. Well, let's get started then.
Okay, let's start off with Defender. I have a feeling that I'm going to either overrate this skill or underrate this skill because I just don't see it not being one of those other ways. And I think that the skill is really good. I think it's just +1 to all your stats when you have a backpack. A lot of your really strong units are either going to be in Cavalier or Paladin, or going to want to dip into Cavalier or Paladin for the aforementioned extremely busted Cavalier Paladin skills that you get. And this is just a really nice cherry on top. Like, obviously Xander starts 1 level off of level 5, and he can get it immediately, after leveling up just 1 time. And then after that, even base Xander with a no support Charlotte backpack as a Berserker can hit with just a backpack. He can hit 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 speed, and that's already pretty good if you could, and you just need to put some tonics into it and make it really, really good. And Defender is just it's going to help you out in whatever you want to do. Aside from being like a dedicated dual strike unit, if you're using like, I don't know, if you're using like an effective damage unit as dual strikes. But other than that, I think Defender's like, I just think it's really good. I think I would put it into like always worthwhile or nice to have. I think I would put it into always worthwhile, honestly.
I think I'd put it in nice to have. And the reason is, Defender's effect is pretty nice. Like all stats +1 essentially. It is limited to being paired up, which not every unit wants to do all the time, but there are a fair few units who can just operate that way and do well. You mentioned Xander. He's by far the most likely person to get this, and it's great for him. Ryoma, if he gets Silas Friendship or Xander Friendship and Rev, also kind of appreciates going to Paladin for 3 levels and getting Elbow Room Shelter Defender. It works really nicely for him. But for everyone else, the problem with Defender isn't so much with the class, it's with the skill itself, it's with the class that it's in and its relation to how the gameplay evolves. Because typically, well, you can get it pretty early if you instantly promote an early Cavalier like Perry or Silas. But then it doesn't really matter very much because you're not going to rely on that unit much deeper into the game anyway. So yeah, they'll get their all stats +1 from pairing up, but it's just not that useful from then on out. But if you train them up a little bit more, promote it like 15, 16, 17 or higher, you're trying to make them at least a reasonable long-term unit. The trouble is that you get Defender as a level 5 promoted unit right around the time when a lot of enemies start acquiring ranged weapons. And again, I'm speaking mostly of Conquest, because Birthright keeps unpromoted enemies until like chapter 22 or something. But what you see in Conquest is there are suddenly a lot of bows, shurikens, tomes, magic weapons in chapter 20. Things where Paladins don't work very well. You can still make them work, certainly, but they just don't have the right tools to be very effective in those parts of the game. So what I often find is that, although I'd always love to have Defender, it usually makes more sense to go get something else instead. Because you don't really want to stay in Paladin if you're not someone who has a personal 1-2 range sword. I mean, you can do it if you're 11 sword person too, but you still want to get out of Paladin and go to like Dark Knight for that anyway. So I in my opinion, this skill is a victim of circumstance more than anything. I like its effect. I always sort of wish I had the time to go get it, but usually if I've got Silas or Parry, then I'm trying to get them out of Cavalier and into something like Bow Knight, at least. If you're going into the Cav tree later in the game, like you're using your infinite supply of seals after chapter 20 to go get Elbow Room and Shelter, then yeah, I would generally recommend going through Paladin and not Great Knight and getting Defender as well if you have the time to go get an extra skill, because it's a nice bonus. But I would not call it always worthwhile, because I don't think, given the set of other skills that you could try to go get, I don't think it's worth sticking it out in Paladin for long enough to get this.
Okay, I think this is, I actually disagree with you on this one, and I actually have some reasons. I think your argument is completely fair, and I agree with it, for the most part, except for the part where you say that Paladin's not necessarily worth sticking with for that long. I say this as a person that has used Paladin, like non-Xander Paladins, in the form of either, I mean, I've done it with like Nozu, I think, like once or twice, and it was fun, but like that's not what I'm saying. I've done it with Effie, I've done it with Parry like 7 times, I've done it with Silas once or twice, and these units are able to make these make the stats that you get in Paladin work, and it's because the fact that, like, let's look at the units that you have that are likely to get into Paladin. Well, obviously Silas and Parry, all right. Let's talk about Parry, right? Parry is a unit that has a shit ton of strength and shit ton of speed. Like, you can easily get a unit like her one-hit KOing, not one rounding, one-hit KOing enemies if you do proper target selection. With a Keaton pair-up, Berserker, Keaton or Berserker pair-up, so like, I don't know, with an S support, so that's 7 strength. And then you have, 15 off of Paladin, and then you add a couple, I don't know, like 4 from level ups, that's 19 plus 7. 17, 24, 25, 26, 27, 20, 29 from elbow room, 30 from defender, 33 from 34 from her personal. Like, you're stacking damage to the point where you could probably give her a solid weapon, and she could probably one-hit KO. She could and will one-hit KO mages on enemy phase. And also, like, with Silas, the same thing can be said, except he's going to be tanking and dealing really good damage to physical enemies in the form of, like, you can do this against Chapter 18 Heroes, for example. You can do this against Chapter 23, though Silas is going to have a bit of a hard time. And that's another thing. You can actually just straight up undeploy your Paladins for Chapter 19, 20, 21, just deploy your Flyers. And because of the stat boost that Defender gives them, and the fact that you're playing Fates and you have access to so much stat stacking, you have the initiative to be able to bring these units back without having to put in an insane amount of investment, and only having to put in a decent amount of investment for like a chapter or two to get them back onto the wagon, so to speak. And outside of Conquest, in Rev, I mean, like, have you seen Rev Silas? The man is an absolute beast. He doesn't, like, anything that you can give Rev Silas is going to be good. Like, that guy, what does he have, like, freaking 20 defense or something? Rev Silas, yeah, Silas has 19 defense base, 19 strength base. He joins you right before Shura, which, to be fair, is not that great of a comparison for him. But still, this guy has B-rank swords, B-rank lances. That's before promotion. You're going to get really good stats on him, and Defender's only going to make that better. And his speed, which still is going to be a bit suspect, is going to be helped out greatly by that. And you can also, afford to give him somebody like Charlotte for a couple of chapters before Xander joins, because who else are you going to give Charlotte to, right? I think that Defender not only has workarounds to the things that you say that are easy, but also in and of itself is a workaround to some of the problems that you're saying with the class. To the point where I don't know if I agree with the nice to have rating, but I don't know if the reasons that you give are valid enough to put it into nice to have. I think the reason that it would be nice to have is that the impact isn't all that great, all things considered.
Well, I just want to answer a couple things you said. You mentioned, like, being able to one-shot mages, and that's definitely possible. It's trickier to one-shot them on enemy phase as a paladin. You can definitely do it, but you pretty much have to use a javelin and probably put together a more complicated setup than just give your paladin a parapet and stick them with your javelin in front of the mages, and they're not that good at that. Even parry has like decent res, but it's not actually fantastic. So there's just a couple matchup problems that limit them. And yeah, if you do follow strategies where you end up skipping a couple maps in a row and then bringing them back, Defender does help make them usable, but that doesn't make those units great anymore. And yeah, the actual impact of the skill is not that high. So I still think it's fairly high on the nice to have list.
Sorry for you.
I would.
Oh, if you'll give me a moment here. I'm doing some background research real quick. Okay, there we go. Back. Okay.
I'd put it fairly high on the nice to have list, but yeah, it's probably a little bit better than Astra, I would say.
Okay, I can see that. Let's move on to Aegis, and I'm gonna let you talk about Aegis to give me some time to fact check real quick.
Okay. Aegis is, to be straight about this, it's not a very important skill. Again, it comes from a class that's not really built to fight the enemies that Aegis helps you against. It can have some uses, like it's one of the things that can help make Xander kind of respectable anti-mage unit, which is not really essential. You can definitely do those duties with other units who are just better suited for it naturally. It's just the kind of thing that you could go get and make one unit who's already good at a lot of other stuff also reasonably good at the anti-mage combat. But beyond him, and I guess maybe Ryoma, you don't get a lot of mileage out of this. It's super late, and Fates is a game where you can just deploy the right unit who's going to handle these enemies for you without really relying on procs to get the job done. And if necessary, you can apply rallies or auras like Inspiration to make it so that your Kaze or I don't know, any other like reasonably resistant unit.
I mean, sure, Niles.
Yeah, they can do it. This does work against bows as well. There aren't actually that many enemy bows that you would use this against. Come to think of it, I mean, there are some, but usually they show up in mixed groups, where you're going to be fighting a bunch of like, melee weapons anyway. So it's got a minor effect. It kind of makes certain characters a little bit better if you go and get this, but I wouldn't really try too hard to put together some kind of Aegis-centric build. I think it lives in that, like, I was going to say in that Swordbreaker territory, but I think it's actually a little bit worse than that. It's better than Deathblow, I think. Just because you can use it more, even though Deathblow is an earlier skill.
Yeah, Aegis is basically suffering from the fact that it's in direct comparison to dumb shit that you can do in Three Houses with Crest Weapon that gives you Aegis and Pavise, and also running real Aegis and Pavise and doing dumb stuff like that. So I think it's even worse now that I've experienced the true beauty that you can get.
Well, I think that's a bit unfair, but yeah, there's certainly a kind of defense stacking you can do in this game, but that's not. You don't do it with Pavise.
Aegis and Pavise are not the skills you should be doing to try to make that work.
Yeah.
Also, I went and checked. This is like 15. Okay, so 15-5 parry. You give her, a javelin, S rank Keaton pair up, defender, elbow room, yada yada yada. Give her a tonic. Unforged javelin takes all the HP except for 3 off of your average sorcerer. So on chapter 18. So you add that
on 18, but I would never do that in 18 because of the Mjolnir one.
You know what? You're not wrong. But you see what I'm getting at here, right? Yeah, now you put that on Silas and he goes up against the heroes instead.
Yeah, but the heroes are the easiest enemies on the map, so that's kind of whatever to me. It's definitely possible. I just think there's the realm of things you can do to get a job done, the realm of things that you should do are different. And Defender can help do odd jobs, but it's not really essential to any one of the actual roles that you're looking for.
But I mean, Defender is still pretty good for reaching benchmarks for player phases in terms of speed.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I like it. It's nice to have.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to put the stats out there. Just put the numbers out there so that the viewers can understand that I'm not actually completely speaking out of my own ass right now. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's move on to Luna. Luna, I think is it the worst of the your base kit offensive proc skills? Soul, Astra, Luna. I think it might be, honestly, because dealing extra damage to an enemy on a proc skill, that's cool and all, but you have to add something. You have to add some extra sauce in there for it to be worth it. Astra adds in sauce by giving you extra shield gates. What's his face? Dragonfang does that by making it being. It actually doesn't. That's why it's not that great. What was I thinking of? I'm thinking of something else. Oh yeah, Rend Heaven adds in some sauce by having a really high proc rate. Stuff like that. But Luna is just ideal more damage, and you might deal a lot more damage, but the only time you would really need Luna to kill enemies, and this goes for a lot of these offensive proc skills that don't really have any other side effects, is against Wary Fighter Generals. And to be fair, there are a lot of Wary Fighter Generals in Conquest, but at that point, just send a hammer against them and they die. The fact you have ways of dealing with these things that don't involve a skill percent proc rate on a class that doesn't even have that much good skill. I think compared to the rest of the Paladin family, I think Luna is kind of a disappointment, all things considered. I would put it around the same tier as Dragonfang, because I think I would put it around the same area as Rend Heaven, because it's, basically does the same thing except it has a bigger effect and it's more universal.
Yeah, I agree with the overall neighborhood here. I think the best way to think of... Oh, and I want to address what you said about Wary Fighter Generals. It is kind of hard to kill them with just a hammer, but yes, you can definitely combine that with some dual strikes or something and take them out pretty quickly. I know someone will comment on that. I think the way to think about Luna is and really Rend Heaven to a degree, is and Dragon. It's essentially a crit. Most of the time, well, I mean, you could have it on a particularly weak character, in which case it maybe is more effective than a crit, but basically this is a way that you can get an extra kill, and you get a certain chance added to your attack to just kill the enemies.
Oh.
And fundamentally, most of the proc skills work the same way. Well, Rend Heaven won't do anything if you attack the wrong enemy and it activates, but generally their effect is you're going to do, depending on where you are in the game, 10, 15, 20 extra damage, and that's probably going to be enough to kill the enemy. If you're using a unit and a weapon that's even remotely appropriate.
Yeah,
so,
okay. like, to be fair, this is all completely, like, matchup dependent, though. Like, this is like talking about, it is like arguing between Moonbow and Glimmer when you're playing heroes. It just doesn't matter. They both do the same thing. And
yeah, you say that like I've ever played heroes.
Yeah, but that's for the heroes players out there. Basically, Moonbow is like mini Luna, Glimmer is like mini Astra, and it's like it depends on how much defense the enemy has. It depends on it's one of them. Like, they're both gonna do the same thing. It's just sometimes one's gonna be better, and you don't really have a consistent way of predicting that, and like acting on that prediction because it's already an unreliable thing to begin with. So I think we just put it around the same tier, like in the same place as these other skills, and just forget about it.
Yeah, existing. I would probably drop Luna a little bit lower. Maybe like it's another one of those things I think is like Lancebreaker territory. It's something you can get.
I think
that can help you. I think the most interesting application is probably on Arthur, because he can go in. He has natural Cavalier. He can go get this at some point when he's also trying to go get Elbow Room. And you can combine Luna with his own natural crit rate if he goes back into Berserker and gets a Killer Axe. And then, like, yeah, his listed crit would be like 60% usually. But then you've got a Luna chance to bump it up to like... He has really good skill, actually. So you can bump it up to like 70-something effectively. And that's all right. It does work on both phases, unlike Deathblow, so it's like a smaller effect for him than if you actually gave him Oni access. But
I mean, to be fair, it's just a straight up more likely crit, because crit is skill -4 divided by 0.5, and Luna is just skill percent. It's just skill percent.
Yes, although you can technically stack more sources of crit than you can just increase your proc rate. Mm-hmm. Normally, I mean, I guess you could somehow combine Quixotic and
I mean, yeah, like how many skills here even give crit, right? It's Deathblow, Gamble, like what else?
I don't think it's, well, technically skill +2. It's not really skill based, it's more like support bonus based.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can force a really high crit rate if you...
Yeah. I mean, it's just the same build. It's just that one of them you have different skills, and one of them you just have a big funny crit number. And personally, I would take the crit number because it looks funnier. You can show it to people easier, and also it doesn't take up skill slots.
True.
Okay. Moving on to Armored Blow. Armored Blow is -10 physical damage taken when you initiate. This skill is Gunter City right here. This. Armored Blow, you can get this so easily on Gunter because his internal level is super low. I mean, that's why that's part of what makes Gunter like surprisingly busted. Like, you can get him Trample insanely easily. It's like using one of your retainers if your retainers had... No, it's just like using one of your retainers because it's not like they have good long-term stats to begin with. I think it's a fine skill. It's mitigation on player phase. And unlike Warding Blow, it has more of a wide application. Like, if you can initiate with a Lance against like a Berserker and take minimal damage, you can initiate against an enemy that has effective damage against you and take a lot less damage than you would otherwise. You can do a bunch of stuff like that, and you can take riskier engagements much easier. And like, this is most useful on Gunter, as I said. And you can do dumb stuff like give Gunter a Beast Killer and send him up against Kitsune, and if you stack him properly, he just doesn't take enough damage to die. And he has good skill, so he'll just hit them. I think it's a fine skill. I think it's bottom of nice to have, like, or middle of niche, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think I mentioned when we were talking about Warding Blow that one of the nice things you can do with those two skills is you can combine them with other skills that support teammates who are following up after your own attack. So you go in and you use Warding Blow or Armored Blow to hit an enemy, get in a nice position, take minimal damage from your first attack, and then ideally you have some other skills to go with it that boost the damage of other allies who are going to come in and dual strike off of you. And this works out kind of nicely, actually, for Armored Blow in a way that it doesn't for Warding Blow, because it's just more accessible. You brought up Gunter, and he can do something like, if you want, you can train him up to level 15, get Armored Blow, and then go to Malig, and get both Savage Blow and Trample, so you get Savage Blow to weaken all the other enemies around, and then probably in the end go to like Wyvern Lord. That's a lot to invest in Gunter, but it is a reasonable choice. It's something you could probably do towards the later part of the game.
And besides, I mean, you're going to be deploying Gunter like regardless of what you do because he's such a good backpack, and turning him into a flying class is going to make him a better backpack in terms of like movement, because you can do stuff like, you know, have Corrin. Like Corrin, you can't often choose where Corrin starts deployed, so you can pair Corrin up with Gunter, and because he has more movement as a Wyvern Lord, he can move further, stuff like that. It might end up making your end game a lot easier if you can plan it properly, things like that. So you might actually find yourself doing this to begin with Gunter often. So hey, you know.
Yeah, and then there's also Jacob. I would actually recommend, if you're not gonna like super invest in Jacob and give him Corrin marriage and partner seal through a bunch of stuff, I would recommend going Great Knight and not Paladin on him. He hits the thresholds much more easily in Great Knight, generally speaking. And then he gets Armored Blow when he already has Gentium. He can go get Inspiration at some point if you want. And then depending on who he marries, he could probably transition into another great class after that.
Go Malignite Jacob. Just do the Malignite Felicia strats, except you don't use magic.
Mm-hmm. And then there are other fun candidates for this. Like, actually, Elise can do that. You can go like Wyvern early and then go through Great Knight late if you want. Just pretty hilarious. Not really the best use of your time. So I still think that kind of build is a niche thing. It's not that important. Usually its effects can be replicated just by like focusing your attention on getting stronger units who have better damage boosting skills, as opposed to having your like player phase lead who goes in and attacks and then supports their teammates. Yeah. But it's an interesting effect, or interesting style of play, and it is viable. But
this skill is going to actually see a lot of usage on Gunter and not much on anybody else, because there's not many other units that are a Great Knight, B, somebody that you're already going to be deploying, but also C, somebody that you're not necessarily going to be putting into combat all too often.
Well, not going into combat often works against it, really, which is why if you're only using Gunter as a backpack, it's really not worth sticking around for Armored Blow in Great Knight at all. You should probably, well, I mean, if you just want to staple him to Corrin and call him day, you can do that and leave him in Great Knight. But a lot of times it is nice to go to Malig or Wyvern Lord, depending on what Corrin wants, and not really worrying about Gunter's skills.
Keep in mind, he also has like good weapon rank. So like I've had Gunters just like straight up like take half of a chapter 26 general's HP off just by using a hammer, because hammers are stupid like that. It's just having good weapon ranks is it's better than you would think it is. Yeah,
and he has high skill, which really helps him if he's ever dual striking. So that's a nice feature.
I think I do think that it goes somewhere around like I don't know. It definitely goes in niche, but where would I put it? Is it better than? That's Quicksalve. No, it's better than Quicksalve.
Yeah, I think it's a bit better than Quicksalve.
Why is Quicksalve up here? You know what? It can stay there. Whatever. It's not like people are tuning into this video to be like, man, I wonder where they place Quicksalve.
Yeah, I mean, I think we discussed it before. Quicksalve is one of those things where you can use it very effectively to your advantage if you try. And
it's also consistent, I guess. So
yeah,
a lot of these skills here suffer from either like inconsistency or just some kind of other like not much of a use case. Here's Wary Fighter, and I kind of like Wary Fighter. There's a lot of skills in this game where you see them on enemies and you're like, oh my fucking god, not this. Like, you know, Shades of Savage Blow, Shades of Poison Strike, Inevitable End, and Staff Savant are so good that only enemies can have them because players can't have good things. But then you go to Worry Blow, and Wary Fighter, and Wary Fighter is actually the kind of skill that you can actually make good enough, like really good use of it if you know what you're doing. Now, to be completely honest, this is useful on like maybe 3 units in the game. But on those 3 units, it's damn useful. Like if you really want to go for it, wait, never mind. Gunter doesn't even get Knight. It's Cavalier that he has.
I was going to ask, who's your third? Because I can kind of think of 2. But...
Yeah, because like there's Benny, and then there's Effie if you don't want to put too much into her and just use her as a solid combat unit. And then after that, like if you're doing some stuff with like you might be able to do some stuff with like Baruka if you really are just giving up on her speed, which can be kind of funny. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But you can go for it because I mean her stats are suited for a class that are just really big bulk. But I mean I wouldn't really recommend it because Wyvern's just really good. You know, you can do it. You can really do it on any like really slow but really strong unit. Hell, you could do it on Arthur if you really wanted. I wouldn't. Again, maybe I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but I mean, it's up to you. I mean, again, Ignatius too. He has a lot better speed, but he still has, you know, you're still probably gonna have a ton of HP on him and ton of bulk on him, so you can just make use of Wary Fighter. I think Wary Fighter is a completely fine skill. I don't think it's nearly like bad enough to be a niche because yes, the number of units that can use it effectively is low, but there's so many like parts of like Fates where the enemies are like, haha, I'm really fast and I can double you and deal a bunch of damage, and then you come in with Wary Fighter and they're like, shit, now what do I do? You know, the Kitsune gets shut down by this, absolutely. Ninjas, no, not necessarily, because they do often have like Savage Blow, so that's not Savage Blow or Grisly Wound or Poison Strike. But yeah, like for example, like Basaras, they don't really have too much offense, but they have a decent amount of speed, especially compared to the average. Stuff like you're definitely gonna eat shit against Oni chieftains, but if you're up against like, you know, there's a lot of classes that just don't hit too hard, but double like Kinshi Knights, they definitely get hard countered by this. I just think that there's a lot of moments where you will be happy that you have Wary Fighter, and even though it's not like you won't be happy if you have Wary Fighter on Kaze, you're probably not gonna be happy, but the fact that it's so useful on like a few units, I think it's nice to have.
I think you're slightly overstating the case for Wary Fighter, because I think for most other characters who aren't Benny, there are certainly a few that are slower than average and will have trouble doubling many kinds of enemies. But for the most part, they don't get doubled that much, except against certain kinds of very fast and very weak enemies, like ninjas, where, like even in Benny's case, like he doesn't need Wary Fighter to beat the ninjas in chapter 17, because he can just stack enough defense to not take damage from them. Or if you prefer, you can set it up so he takes 1 damage from them, and then they hit him for 1 over and over again. Although you will have to heal him after that, because eventually poison will take him down. So the actual scenarios that I think Wary Fighter is useful in is if you're going with Combat Benny, which works okay. He's, I think, a little better than people think, just because he's got a great personal skill. He is very tanky. He can shut down a lot of stuff that could be annoying to you.
Chapter 19.
Yeah, 19, 17 as well. He can just park. He can park in the way of people unpromoted and still like totally body block whole waves of reinforcements, which is pretty funny. And if you promote him fairly quickly and you get him up to Wary Fighter, that makes him better at this job, or at that job. And it's also useful, depending. It's a useful thing to pass down to Ignatius, not usually long term, but just because of his paralog and the way it helps him resist the ninjas who are going to attack him for a little while longer. That can make or break your plans for reaching him and
if you don't have
time.
Wary Fighter, you might have to end up using Rescue, and nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, that is a map that you can solve by clever shelter singing, and basically get to Ignatius before the enemies do, without even using Rescue. but I don't think you should have to work out the exact optimal solution to sing your way to victory.
Also, like
all the time.
It's not like Ignatius is a game-breaking unit, so I often just say just skip the paralog and don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always down to play more Fates, so I like playing as many paralogs as I can, just as a matter of course, and I give credit to skills if they can help me do that, because I think it's useful and
absolutely,
interesting.
But I often play on male Corrin, and you have to pick at least one person that you can't get married, that one male that doesn't get married, and I mean, I'm not picking Xander to not get married. Are you kidding me? That extra stats, every point of extra stat that you give to Xander is worth it. Like, who else am I gonna pick? Laszlo? Soleil's pretty solid. I mean, like, I'm definitely not gonna pick Niles to not get married. Nina's like okay, and also he gets, like, him getting married means that he can get access to a different class, and he's your capture unit. And at the end of the day, it often just ends up being like, I mean, I guess I'm not marrying Ignatius. I mean, I'm not marrying Benioff because he can do what he needs to do without being married.
And what you really have to do is embrace the eugenics and marry Gen 2.
Marry Gen 2, man. I was thinking I was thinking like marry Flora, and that's already really late. And oh my god, I just can't imagine marrying Corrin that late. I always marry Corrin so early.
So what I would do with Wary Fighter is I would still call it niche, actually, because there's really only one character who really wants it, who actually gets a serious benefit from it. And he doesn't actually need it to do a lot of the things that he does anyway. It's a little bit more annoying to use him if he doesn't already have Wary Fighter, and you have to be a little bit more careful.
Absolutely. Wary Fighter solidifies his bulk against mages, though, to such an extent. Like, without it, he's okay against mages, but not great. With it, he's really, really good against mages.
Oh, well, I would contest really, really good, but it can certainly help him out. And I like making Benny a decent unit because his personal skill is actually really, really helpful in a lot of cases. Dropping enemy avoid by 10 in a 2-tile radius, more effective than you might think.
I mean, we have Heartseeker all the way up here, and Benny basically has Anathema from Awakening.
Anathema, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunately just unique to a character who isn't exactly up to par when you've got a bunch of other absolute gods
his
that you can set up.
His join time absolutely screws him over.
Yeah, although his base level is nice. I really appreciate that. So I would call it, I still think it's probably better than like Replicate, honestly. But I wouldn't really put it higher than that. Like,
okay.
I did say back with Life and Death that most of the time, for most characters, it's just going to be annoying to you. I think Wary Fighter is actually in the same boat, where there's a couple cases where it can be quite strong, but most of the time it's not something that you want to go out of your way for unless you know what you're doing. And the difference is that Life and Death is a lot more powerful than Wary Fighter is.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to Pavise. I think we should just put Pavise where Aegis is, but like one spot higher, right?
I think that's basically fair. It is less accessible just because it's in general, and most of the time you don't want to go through general. But if you want to put together a shields-based build,
I've done it with like Wary Fighter, Paladin, Benny, and it's surprisingly good because access to Brave Lance is a lot easier when you consider that he has like B rank lances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's possible to stick it out, and there are a couple characters who can actually do reasonably well in general, like for specific situations, where sometimes that actually makes it possible to go in at like level 13, and then just you happen to get Pavise. But, it's just not very spectacular.
Yeah, like Azura. Who said that? Get out of here! Oh my god. Can't believe they already snuck in here. Alright, we need to get through this quickly then, so that before they taint our minds. Let's move on to... Oh, we have a bunch of rallies to cover because Hoshido promoted rallies are what? Rally Magic, Rally Speed, and even then, I mean... Alright, let's get to Rally Strength.
Yeah, the Nohrian rallies are fire.
Yeah. And I mean, it also makes sense because you get access to a lot more of them in Conquest because of the recruits that you get from capturing. Rally Strength. Rally Strength is a level 5 Berserker skill. It's, again, you use the Rally command, and it's +4 Strength to all allies within 2 spaces. Rally Strength is... It's kind of an odd skill for a Berserker to have, because you do expect them to be a lot more of an offensive unit, but it actually becomes a lot better when you consider that Berserkers are actually really great backpacks. So... You can occasionally, like, if there's a situation that the person that unit backpacks for just straight up can't deal with a situation, like if you're up against, if you have, like, you know, Camilla and she's still a Wyvern Lord, and you're trying to deal with an entire squad of archers, you know, that backpack is probably not going to be doing too much that turn. And if they're level 5, which backpacks do gain a little bit of EXP whenever they pop shield gauge, so. Like, it's not...
Or if they block enemy dual strikes.
Yeah, exactly.
They do get credit for that.
It's not exactly game-changing, but it's probably going to be enough to eventually get you to Rally Strength. And, like, using it to support your other units that are actually going to be useful in that situation. For example, in that situation, I don't know, give Rally Strength to somebody like, I was going to say Kaze, no. But, like, if you have a Niles that's bulky enough to take on that area, you can give it to him. If you have, if you for some reason need to give it to Xander for God knows what reason, if you need to give it to somebody like Silas, somebody like, I don't know, Perry, Selena, Laszlo, you know, like, there's a lot of people that will like having +4 strength because strength is a good stat. And I think that the fact that Berserker is such a good backpack elevates the skill from being like nice to have to always worthwhile. Because, like, if you even as like a full all-out offense Berserker, what are you gonna really have? Axefaire, like at most you're gonna have like Axefaire, like elbow room, like a few of Axefaire, elbow room, quick draw, maybe life and death if you can swing it, something like Trample. Like, you might still be able to find a spot for Rally Strength, and I think that's a nice place for it to sit, and I think I would put it into always worthwhile, like at least up with Rally Luck, probably above it.
Well, I for one think it's better than Rally Speed. It's not. I would say it's not so much that Berserkers being great pair-up bots makes this more viable, but it is true, because basically if they're constantly forced to decide between, I want to pair up with someone else to give them 7 or 8 strength, and I want to spend my turn rallying, there's some tension there. But it is true that you can. It's a reasonable plan to just early promote someone like Charlotte or Arthur to Berserker, and they can definitely get not only their small burst of experience from getting dual guards, but you can often find opportunities for them to pick up a cheap kill every now and then. And because they'll be underleveled for most of the mid game, they'll be getting like 40-something XP a pop. So it's not that hard to get them to level 5. And it's very, very useful to have this.
Also, you also get a decent number of, like, if you don't manage to get it on your Berserkers, you also get a bunch of recruits later on that can have it. Like, Gazak has Rally Strength after you just level him up, like, a few times. Rallyman obviously has Rally Strength. The Spearmasters in Chapter 23 that each have 3 rallies, they also have it. Don't sleep on the Spearmasters, by the way. Those guys are good as hell. There's also, there's a lot of, there's a couple of Master of Arms that are randomly on that map that have Rally Strength. That map is full of rallies, anyways. You can find easy ways to get Rally Strength.
But yeah, I think overall it's actually more effective than Rally Speed, because I think in this game, damage stacking is ultimately more important than really high-end speed thresholds, which is what Rally Speed is normally used for. You don't really need it to get to like normal speed thresholds, because you have other sources of speed for that. It can help you there, but
I kind of disagree to some extent, right? Because like your easiest other way to get to speed threshold is Inspiring Song, right? Because Inspiring Song gives you 3 speed, and it's available for a lot longer. But let's say you're in the late game, you're on Chapter 26, you're trying to approach the right room, but you need to figure out your action economy very properly. Having Shigure just do Rally Strength for everybody, even though not everybody's going to be able to use it, letting some people reach the benchmarks might be better, because, that means that your Azura is not taking one of her like potentially many turns, but
Yeah.
at least one of her turns.
No,
So
don't get me wrong. Like Rally Speed has, I think is what you meant to say with Shigure. Rally Speed definitely has its applications. I just think they tend to get more important like right at the end of the game, and that's nice. Like it's important, but it's overall like less essential to your plans throughout the run than something like Rally Strength usually ends up being.
I mean, I can see it. I still don't think that. I still think that they should stay together, but I'm willing to put it above Rally Speed.
All right.
All right. Next up is Axefaire. Axefaire is I think it's a great fair skill. I think it's probably the best of the one range fair skills because it's on a class that's already all about just absolutely shit canning enemies, right? Berserker has big strength, big speed, big HP, no defense, and it has Axefaire and it has big crit too. And Axefaire just helps you along that goal. It's similar to how Bowfaire and Quick Draw is really it's really contiguous. Like you can see the path that they want you to take. And I think it works really well because there's two kinds of Berserkers in Fates. The ones that are backpacks and the ones that are absolutely shit can enemies. And this is, Rally Strength is the one for the ones that are backpacks, Axefaire is for the ones that kill enemies. And I think that Axefaire is a great skill that is a skill that's great at doing that job.
Yeah, I essentially agree with your point. Berserkers are terribly underrated as actual combat units, and because they kind of break the rules about what physical units can do just because their strength is so high. And putting Axefaire on top of that is just the cherry on top. And what's great about Axefaire is it's also accessible to a large selection of Wyvern Riders who can combine it with Trample and Strength +2, and potentially, depending on what other classes they have access to, yet another great skill like Heartseeker or Elbow Room.
And it's also available to anybody that's married to a Berserker, which is probably going to be like Camilla, Xander, and then one other female unit, because you have Keaton, Arthur, and Charlotte usually goes to Xander. One of Keaton and Arthur usually goes to Camilla, and then you have the other for another female unit.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably never go into Berserker on Xander, but...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not.
But yeah, like Axefaire is a great skill. It combines with other great skills. It's on a very powerful class. Axes are an excellent weapon type. Well, I should qualify that. They're a great weapon type if you come with an axe rank, or you're able to train it up quickly, very, very early in a campaign. Axes are not great if you're just like, if you've been a Bow Knight all game, then you switch to Wyvern Lord at chapter 20. Like, you just rather have lances because they have more hit, and you don't have the weapon ranks to use all the good axes, and you never will.
I'd say Bronze Axe is solid enough.
Oh, a Bronze Axe is a solid weapon. It's just I would take a Bronze Lance with like 1 less damage, but 10 more hit.
I've never used Bronze Axe parry. I've always just gone Lance.
And you're not going to get to the fun stuff, like, depending on your route, like the Dual Club, Braid Axe, the Great Club if you want to go that route. Even the Venge Club is actually, it's not great, but it's kind of fun. But you just don't get to use those tools if you're a latecomer to axe classes. But especially in the Nohrian cast, like, axes are very well distributed, and Berserker access is very well distributed, and this has such great synergy with other damage boosting skills that you can get.
I mean, you can get Axefaire so easily on Camilla that if you're not doing it, seriously, what are you doing?
Well, it's not essential to every strategy, but yes, it's definitely there, and Camilla is one of the easier routes to having a Takumi killer. Just get the Trample, pick up Axefaire by Baruka Friendship, and maybe pick up one other useful skill along the way.
Baruka Friendship? Why not? I mean, she usually marries somebody that can give her Berserker.
Yeah, but Baruka Friendship is faster.
True.
And she might marry someone like Niles too, or Silas for cav access. Because sometimes, just depending on what you want to use her for, she cares about the speed, and sometimes even skill boost more than she cares about just giving more damage. from Para. Great skill. I'm kind of tempted to say it's better than Shurikenbreaker, actually.
I can't in good conscience put it above Shurikenbreaker. I appreciate the spirit, but I just don't think that it's like, because the number of units that A, have good axe rank, B, have like easy access to berserkers, C, are going to be useful in the late game to the point where they're going to get to level 15 promoted, and D, are going to be able to do stuff with that Axefaire that you can't already replicate through other methods. I think the list it's bigger than average, but I don't think it's as big as you might think, because it's like, it's going to be like Camilla, Baruka, Arthur if you train him, Charlotte if you train her, if you really want to, you can do it with Effie if you get her into fighter early on, and then like and then like maybe like one other unit if you can swing it properly.
Yeah, potentially kids, depending on what your plan is for, like, if you're early promoting one of the parents and still getting them up to Axefaire. If it's like Camilla who gets it early, then she can potentially pass it down. But,
yeah, and on the other hand, like, if we're just talking about a Soul Master Ninja build, we have Laszlo, Silas, Kaze. I'm pretty sure. I think Saizo has a friendship that can give him access to.
He has
Soul.
Laszlo friendship, I believe.
Yes, and that because I don't know this because I've done it. I know this because there's a Cypher card where he's a hero, so Cypher's coming in helpful. That's already 4 units right there that all actually make somewhat okay usage of that one specific tank build. And that's Shurikenbreaker helping them out there. And there's still just like regular offensive Master Ninja that's going to make good use of Shurikenbreaker. So I don't think that it's, I think that it's like right. I think it's there, like maybe there, but I think it's there.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now, okay.
All right, Soul.
Soul is hero level 5, and I think it's a great skill to have on Xander, and not much of anything else, sadly. Well, actually, we just talked about Soul Master Ninjas. If you can do it like easily enough, I think Laszlo is by far the easiest person to get Soul Master Ninja on, because you don't have to do like friendship with Kaze and Silas, or friendship with Kaze and somebody that has access to mercenary. You don't have to do friendships between people that don't have a fast support, and Laszlo just has Ninja built in, so that I think is the easiest one. And when you do it, it's actually pretty fun, and it's also pretty solid, because like ninjas weren't the game isn't designed around ninjas having access to like good 1 to 2 range that is bulky on the physical side, deals physical damage, and also isn't named Xander. Like, having all of those things together, it doesn't really break the game, but it lets you do things on multiple fronts that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And the fact that Master Ninja has good res is just the cherry on top. This is also really good on Xander himself, because again, you're marrying Xander to Charlotte. You turn Xander into a hero for a couple of levels. He gets HP plus 5, gamble, and then you immediately on a quick gamble, and then you get soul on him, and that's pretty good. I mean, if you stay in, you can also stay in a bit longer to make sure that he doesn't have beast weakness for stuff like chapter 19, chapter 26 even. And you might end up getting Axebreaker, which is the next skill we'll talk about, but I don't really care much about Axebreaker, if I'm being completely honest. I think that it's a skill that does things in many disparate builds, to the point where I think it should be in the nice to have category.
Yeah, I definitely think it's better than Astra. I endorse Soul Master Ninjas, and I have a video about them, actually a couple of videos featuring them. With a caveat, which is it's only good on a character that's already good. Like, to take Laszlo as your example, he's actually not great at going Soul Master Ninja because his defense is actually fairly low, and what you really, really want is high concrete defenses. Like, you just want good stats everywhere to be able to actually have Soul do something for you that you couldn't get just by like stacking the right stats to handle that number of enemies and then healing them afterwards. Because if you want to go beyond that, basically what you're looking at is like some kind of cheese strategy where you just dump your godlike enemy phase unit on way too many enemies, and they end up surviving because they were already capable of beating like 7 of them, and then a skill like Soul let them beat 5 more. And that's not even that relevant for most of the game. There's a couple situations in Conquest late game where you are forced to have like 1 or 2 units battle a whole bunch of enemies in an enclosed space on the enemy phase, and you can't. It's difficult to support them with your whole team. Like I can think of the top of Takami's wall. There are cases in chapter 25 if you are going up the left side or trying to march through the hallway of death, which is really less applicable, but definitely on the left side, if you get lunge chained up somewhere and you still survive, you really can't use Soul for that anyway. But it's one of those places where you can end up having a unit who's isolated and has to fend for themselves, and that's the kind of thing where you actually want this kind of build. But if you're just like trying to, if you've got a unit who can take like 2 hits, and then you're trying to make them take 5, most of the time Soul's going to let you down. Your chances of dying are a bit higher than you might expect.
I think...
So it's something that takes really great characters already and makes them even better. It's not something that makes a decent character great.
I think it might be slightly, not insanely, but slightly undervaluing Laszlo's ability to do it well. Because again, already I've shown like many times that instant promotion Laszlo can do work, and actually, in fact, will do work for you.
What's his base defense as a ninja?
Base defense as a
like
ninja
11?
is 8. So, like,
as a master ninja, is it like 10 or 11? Or is it 9?
Let's see. Base defense is 9.
Yeah. What you really want is like 20.
Yes, but that's like instant promotion to like, and he has like 45% defense as most of his classes. He also benefits from the fact that he has access to stronger post as an enemy phase class without any reclassing whatsoever. You can just turn him into a hero, use him for 5 levels, turn him into a master ninja. I mean, hell, hold up. This is probably bad, but let's see. Laszlo.
Well, I can promise that if you run the actual calculations on chance of death with the kind of thing where you just dump a master ninja with Soul in front of a bunch of enemies, your chances of dying are higher than you think they are, and just a couple of points of defense really do matter in a big way.
I do agree that they matter, but I think the fact that he joins so early and has the easy access means that you can focus on getting him, like, instead of spending the time making sure that Silas and Kaze are next to each other and getting support, you can instead spend that time into making sure that Laszlo is, getting some kind of other investment into making sure that his defense is good enough to work.
Yeah, I mean, you probably want to give him a Draco Shield. You save the chapter 10 one,
and to be fair, like, Draco Shield isn't like the big investments in Conquest are Angelic Robe, Energy Drop, but Energy Drop definitely, and Spirit Dust to some extent, because even though you can get 5 Spirit Dust, there's a lot of good mages in Conquest, and Speedwing. Other than that, like, one Draco Shield isn't going to be missed as much as you think it is, and there's definitely
all right.
Because, I mean, like, +2 defense is nice, but there's already, like, Conquest is filled with classes that just have a lot of bulk. There's General, Great Knight, Paladin, like, even Hero has passable bulk. What else? Wyvern Lord, or even Malignite, because it's based off of Wyvern Lord. Dark Knight to some extent. There's a lot of classes that have enough defense to make it work. And even Bow Knight, like, stuff like, there's a lot of classes that have passable bulk, and a lot of units in Conquest are skewed defensively as opposed to magically bulky. Give me a second here. But yeah, at the end of the day, like, you're probably right about Laszlo specifically, but I still think there's a lot of units. I think the fact that there's that many units that can make a build work, even if it's not put to such great use. I think that it does deserve the placement. Nice to have. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably put it. I think right
below
above.
Vantage.
That's fair. That's all right.
Okay, let's move on to Axebreaker, which is... I don't know how to feel about Axebreaker. You know what? You can go ahead.
This is one of those skills that's just less applicable than you might hope. Definitely it can come up if you're using someone like Hero Xander against the Chapter 26, in Chapter 26 against the bottom room, against Fonz's room. Other than that, I mean, it can also work against the Oni chieftains if you get it that early.
Hey, don't forget Forest's Paralog. There's a ton of berserkers there.
Yeah, that's true. It's just, well, it depends when you do those paralogs. It is a late game skill, right? Level 15 promoted in Hero. Most characters don't want to stick in Hero for that long, and the ones that do don't really need Axebreaker to succeed at what they're trying to do. Like, the only character who I think really excels as a hero and has good reason to stick with a class at the end of the game is Xander. And
even then, you can make good arguments for him to be in like Paladin.
Yes, and there are definitely cases where he's better off in Wyvern Lord. The one character who I think makes the best use of Axebreaker is actually Felicia. If you do, like, she can do the same sort of partner seal shenanigans as Jacob can do, and I think she's actually more effective with them because the things that she achieves with her skill set actually work long term in a way that Jacob's kind of don't.
Magic damage is just better than physical damage.
Yeah, and she's probably the only character who can reasonably make a multi-breaker dodge tanking build. Because, for example...
because she has Tomebreaker in Maid, Axebreaker in Hero, Shurikenbreaker in Bow Knight, and then you can get a Wyvern to get Swordbreaker too.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, that's actually wild.
So, I wouldn't recommend getting all of those, but you can...
Tomebreaker's useless.
You can very reasonably get like two of them. Like, you could take Felicia and go Wyvern Lord first, and then over to Hero, and then off to Malignite as her final class, and she'll have 2 breakers and Trample and Savage Blow and Strong Post.
Forget Savage Blow. You could probably have her in Strategist for a couple of levels. You could straight up have like Demoiselle, Inspiration, Swordbreaker, Axebreaker, Trample. Like, you can run that as your set, and you're probably good as a semi-defensive, semi-offensive unit for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way. That is kind of funny.
And because of her situation with her leveling, she gets these way earlier than anyone else. So I think the breaker skills as a whole are fairly limited in their applicability. Axebreaker is definitely not the most important one. I would call it niche. It's still better than Lancebreaker just because of availability more than anything else. And I think genuinely it's what niche it has is more important than like skill +2 and armor blow. So I'd move it up a couple spots more. But,
yeah, I would say that this skill is actually really nice to have in Iron Man's because like it makes the odds of death against berserkers just critting you randomly so much less. Because there are berserkers that just have weapons that have crit, and you sometimes just have units that don't have the greatest luck. Xander definitely is not one of those units, keep in mind. His luck is stupid for absolutely no reason. But, sometimes you'll notice that, and sometimes you'll have Axebreaker for some reason, and you'll just see that these units just don't have enough hit for you to be worried.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just making sure, because I thought I'd muted for a second. Okay. Okay, let's move on to Rally Skill. Rally Skill is like Rally, like, you look at Rally Luck and then you look at Rally Skill. Oh, man. The rally skill is falling on hard times these days, especially it has gotten worse and worse for rally skill as time has gone on. I still think that all the rallies are always worthwhile if you have access to them, because as a bow knight, you're often just like, hey, I'm in a class that has good stats and access to some of the better weapon types in the game. But you don't really go Bow Knight to chain together a bunch of really busted skills. You go Bow Knight because it's a good class and it has good weapons. So I think that you're often not gonna put your insane god destruction, absolute annihilation units, in Bow Knight. So I think you'll find that you'll have space for rally skill, and it's fine to deploy unit with rally skill. But other than that, it's like 3 hit. That's what you get.
What's 6? Because it's 1.5 times skill. I like 6 hit. I would definitely try to bring a unit who has rally skill once I have access to it, and it really does benefit from being in a good class that has a lot of nice applications, just as a very straightforward unit, mounted, bows, good combat stats, you're just good to go. And
you'll find that you have at least one unit in Bow Knight, and you're gonna end up having the skill, and you might as well deploy that unit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's clearly the worst rally, I think. Even comparing it to Rally Luck, like you said, Rally Luck gives you 4 hit and 4 dodge and 4 avoid, and Rally Skill gives you 6 hit and 2 crit. So I know what I'm taking if I had to choose, but luckily you can stack these things.
Saying that it's 2 crit is kind of disingenuous, because it's skill -4 divided by 0.5, so it's more often it's going to be 3 crit, which is still not that great, but it's a kind of an unfair representation of it.
No, it is literally 2, because it adds 4 skill, and that gets divided by 2 no matter what, so it's always going to be 2 to whatever your previous crit.
Man, my math has just been off today. I don't know what's going on.
No worries.
Let's move on to Shurikenbreaker, which is the Shurikenbreaker it's been screwed over by the circumstances that it's been in. Level 15 promoted. Oh man, there's one chapter you're going to be using this in, and that's chapter 25, and that chapter can easily be skipped in 4 turns by just having your Korin use a dual club against Ryoma, and that is tragic. I'm not putting it in niche. I think I would put it into actually no, I think I would put it in top of niche, because it is just actually, yeah, it's not even, yeah, no, it's actually, no, it's better than Axebreaker. I rally you think Shurikenbreaker, and you're like, oh my god, avoid against Shuriken enemies and hit against them to make sure that I get good hit against them. That's nice. And then you realize that, when am I going to use this, right? You're definitely not getting this before chapter 17, unless you're Gunter. Which, actually, wait, hold up. You might be able to do some absolute nonsense with Gunter, but that's beside the point, because he's probably not going to be able to one-hit KO Master Ninjas unless you do some serious investment into him. But yeah, no. Who are you going to get? Who are you going to get it on? I get, aside from the Felicia stuff that we were talking about, there's not really that many units that have there's a lot of units that have access to it. There's not a lot of units that have access to it at a time where combat against Shuriken enemies is the be-all end-all. It's only the be-all end-all in 2 chapters, and that's chapter 17 and chapter 25 if you're not skipping it, and often you are skipping chapter 25. So I just think that it's just not that good because of the situation that it's in.
Yeah. You came at this from a different direction than I expected, but I think Shurikenbreaker is probably the breaker skill with the most obvious concrete application, which is being able to get through chapter 25 in Conquest without terrible headaches. Although you can say that about Swordbreaker too, on Corn specifically. And I think that does make it more valuable than the other breaker skills. But it is also true, as you said, that there actually aren't that many maps that have ninjas. There are more in the paralogs, so if you value being able to get through more of the paralogs, Siebert's is absolutely
the
atrocious.
right
if you don't
side.
have if you don't
right
have something
side.
to handle ninjas very nicely, then that map is a terrible slog. And there are a couple others that have ninjas as well, but
Ignatius has some that are attacking him. But yeah,
a couple. It can also be sort of convenient just because it lets you kill maids without taking debuffs sometimes, and that's nice. So you can send your Bow Knight Niles in, go assassinate some maids in the late game, and they'll probably not take counterattacks from them. So that's good.
But there's other ways to do that, which also give you other benefits, like getting you could have done Sniper Niles, turn him back into a Bow Knight, and then he has quick draw and Bowfaire, and by that point he just one hit KOs the maid and doesn't even care.
Yeah. Some of the maids in the later parts of the game are a bit bulkier than I think you're giving them credit for. Definitely if he gets all the way to A rank and he gets the Crescent Bow, then he's golden. But before then, it is actually kind of hard, even with a Silver Bow, to go one-shotting things for him. Yeah, so I think it's... Yeah, Shurikenbreaker is probably the most actually useful of the breaker skills, unless you want to go commit to I'm going to send Corn through Wyvern Lord, which is reasonable, although not everyone wants to play that way.
Oh man, I'm going to send my Corn through one of the best classes in the game. Whatever will I do?
Well, some people really like ninja builds or other stuff, so you may not end up going that route. But just to the thing I was adding on was just there actually aren't that many chapters that have ninjas, so they're not a huge deal. I would have kept it probably right below Life and Death myself.
Okay. Yeah, ninjas are like the boogeyman. Everybody tells you, oh my god, the ninjas are so annoying. But they only show up for 2 maps and then they never show up again. But when they show up, they make their presence felt.
True.
Lucky 7. So Lucky 7 is plus 20 hit and avoid on the first 7 turns. This is a skill that I like in theory, but the impact that it has on your run isn't as great as I would like it to be. This is level 5 Adventurer. So you're likely to get it on, Shura doesn't spawn with it, right? No, he's level 2 promoted in... Well, he spawns with it...
He does in the other routes.
Yeah, if you're not playing Conquest, he spawns with it. If you are playing Conquest and he doesn't spawn with it, you're probably there's a decent chance you're gonna get it on Niles if you are just doing the basic Shining Bow strats. And hey, I'm not gonna disparage it. Shining Bow Niles, it's always gonna work, right? It's always gonna do what you need him to do, and it's not like it's gonna be like, oh my god, my Niles is so bad. You're never gonna have to worry about that because Niles is just that good. But hit and avoid plus 20, I don't think it's enough. If it was hit and avoid plus 30, then we're talking. But as it stands, I think it's a reasonably priced skill, level 5 promoted on a class that's kind of niche, but it gives you a solid, consistent buff with a condition that's somewhat that's easy to meet. First 7 turns, a lot of the times you're already timed on maps, and often the first 4 turns are the most important in every single map that you play. Because a lot of the maps you can just end the map in the first 4 turns, and even if you don't, you're getting positioning for the way you're going to approach the map for the rest of the map. I phrased that maybe the worst way I could have possibly phrased it, but I still think that my point stands. This skill is going to give you some kind of nice buffs on the most important parts of every map, but I think the not lack of ease in access, and also the fact that it's not the greatest buff in the world, I think I would put it into nice to have.
I think I agree. Yeah, high end of nice to have. I really like the buff. 20 hit, awesome. Just all the time for the first 7 turns, that's great. I think it's very much like Defender in that it's one of those skills that I can envision. The real prize of going into Outlaw, if you're not already starting in it, is probably movement plus 1. But I can definitely envision sticking around and going for Lucky 7 as well if you're going through the adventurer side. And then that's a great skill to carry over to whatever else you're doing down the line, if you're leaving the outlaw tree again. So yeah, it's a good skill. Outlaw is a bit out of the way for most characters, so I wouldn't necessarily say it's like something you want to focus on when you're deciding how to invest your class changing seals. But I think Lucky 7 does make it kind of difficult when you're playing with someone like Niles to decide which route you want to go, because Bow Knight has better combat stats, except with except with the Shining Bow, and it does have the team support with Rally Skill, but Lucky 7 makes him a lot better at capturing things, and that's pretty worthwhile. Capturing has a 10 hit penalty, and Lucky 7 overcomes that more. And Niles doesn't have the greatest accuracy, so I appreciate having it, and I think you put it in a pretty good spot. Yeah.
I mean, that's when Certain Blow comes in. Also, something that I realized is that Lucky 7 is kind of contiguous with what you want to do with Outlaw, because you mentioned that you're going into Outlaw for movement +1, and Lucky 7 is kind of nice because if you're going movement +1, you're probably coming up with some low turn strats, and I mean, at that point, that means that Lucky 7 is always active. So I just wanted to say that. And okay, here we come to probably the most egregious skill, Pass. This skill, it could be good, but just the way that Fates is made is not doing Pass any favors whatsoever. Fates is a game where you're either just ending the map immediately, or you're with your allies and you're trying to get through by using clever strategies. Pass is only somewhat helping one of those strategies. Pass is really good, really useful for endgame clears because you can get through enemies and not have to worry about it. And that's about it, right? Because when else? Oh no, it's actually to be fair, it's really good for chapter 27 because you just don't have to worry about that squad of lancers and that merchant. But like aside from that, what are you gonna do with Pass? It's a level 15 promoted adventurer skill. That's gonna be such a pain to get if you want it. Like Niles, the Shura, if you hate your life and just want to make Shura put Shura into the only class that he's not that great in. Those are the only two units that you're gonna see this on. I guess Nina, if you're doing like magic Nina, which isn't exactly impossible to do. And on those three units, the only one, like by far the only one that's making use of this is Niles, and that's like for like one thing on endgame, and that's about it. And like to be fair, like having a 9 movement pass unit on endgame is gonna make your life a lot easier in terms of planning it. But there's like 10 other ways to just cheese endgame, so why are you worried about pass that much? I would put it into like niche, like middle of niche, probably lower than middle.
Yeah, middle-ish of niche, I think, is probably okay. Thinking about it, off the top of my head, I can't come up with very many sort of general scenarios where you'd care about having pass. Like, it's not very important in most maps to get right through and to the other side of a particular enemy. It's just not the way the maps are really laid out, where you need to like traverse through enemy groups to get
and
where
often
you're going.
if it's
Unless
like that, then there's going to be terrain also that's going to be inhibiting you, and and you can't really like. It's not like you have free Fujin Yumi effect with pass. You still have to deal with terrain.
That is true. So there are, I guess, a couple places where maybe it'll help you like do some kind of LTC thing, but it's very hard for me to imagine a case where that's true, where you couldn't also achieve that effect with either lunge or entrap.
Yeah, I think they really should have just swapped Lucky 7 and Pass, made Lucky 7 50 hit and avoid, and called it.
That would be interesting. I don't know how I'd feel about that, but it would be interesting. Yeah, and for the record, Pass is not essential to the even a one-turn in-game clear. You can get the enemies that are in your way out of your path by using entrap instead. Or lunge, yes, but that's a little bit trickier on the movement requirements for that. So it has some applications for that. It can help you specifically, like if you need enfeeble on Takumi, it's sometimes you do want to have someone with pass to get through a certain part of the formation to get it through there. Because even if you entrap one of the generals who's in the way, you kind of have to go around to the left, and that moves you away from the range where you need to enfeeble Takumi. But generally speaking, it's just... It sounds better than it is.
Pass is not that great of a skill in such a player phase dominated game as Conquest. For example, in a game like Three Houses, it can be a lot more useful because there's so many kill bosses, and you have such access to such high movement, and Pass just makes your movement that much more efficient. But in this game, it suffers from the way that the game is built. This is Rally Defense, not to be confused with Rally Magic, because they look pretty similar. Rally Defense, I mean, it works like the other rallies. I think Rally Defense is the best of the rallies, not even joking. Like, I think it's straight up the best of the rallies, because it's the perfect confluence of you get access to it early, it's on good classes that your units are going to be, it has a valuable effect, and there's going to be units that are just support units that are also going to get like somewhat easy access to it later on in the game, and it stays relevant for the rest of the game. I just think Rally Defense is really good.
Yeah, I agree. It comes online at a great time. It's basically, depending on who you're getting it on, right around the point where the enemies are all promoting.
What do you mean? You get it on like chapter 9, right?
Well, you can, but I've said my piece before about servant marriage strats. I'm going for Wyvern Lord early.
No, I'm talking about Haitaka having Rally Defense.
Oh yeah, that's true. Well, not chapter 9 then. Earliest you can get him after that is
chapter 10.
right before chapter 10.
Yeah.
If you save Paralog 1 and Invasion 1, or you go like.
Or you go to
save up enough resources, or you just hack them in. It's not that important at that point in the game, actually, because when the enemies are unpromoted, they don't hit so hard that you really need Rally Defense to hit your benchmarks. But it can be very, very powerful immediately after, like chapter 15. It's a great buff to help you clear out chapter 16 very quickly if you want to play that straight up and not do the flyer skips around the perimeter. It works really well in chapter 17. You can use it on people who wouldn't otherwise have enough defense to just straight up body block the ninjas, which can be very helpful. It just like...
Yeah, some of the enemies around when they promote hit so hard, right?
Yeah,
like the chapter 16 berserkers. Oh my god.
Yeah, it patches up your defensive needs in a way that's a lot better than say, a pair-up bot who provides a ton of defense, like a general. Because it applies to several units at once, and it takes up one action on a given player phase, as opposed to essentially deleting that unit from the map. And the way the math works out on the enemy stats versus your stats, it tends to have a pretty big effect on the amount of damage you're taking, and that's very, very helpful.
Also, one more thing is that it's kind of in the same boat as Rally Skill, where you're gonna have units that are in Wyvern Lord, right? Mm-hmm. If you have no units in Wyvern Lord, then oh my god, what are you doing? And
you're playing Birthright, I assume.
Yeah, playing Birthright, exactly.
And not using Scarlet.
And even and at that point, like that, yeah, basically you're gonna have at least somebody in Wyvern Lord, and at some point, enough people are gonna pick this. Like Xander's probably gonna pick this up at some point because he's gonna go into Wyvern for like chapter 19 or something. You know, you're gonna have this on if you're using Haitaka. Like Rallyman's gonna have this. You know, you're gonna have this on like Baruka. You're gonna have this on Camilla eventually. You might have this on Korn. You might have this on Felicia. You might have this on so many people that you might have this on Gunter. There's so many people that it's going to be on that you're going to be able to find one unit that's not doing something more important that turn, take away their turn, and give you more defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's probably the only rally that's likely to show up on like 6 of your characters without even you specifically trying to go get it. Mm-hmm. It just, people want to be Wyvern Lords, so it happens.
Swordbreaker. So I remember you saying that Shurikenbreaker was the best breaker. I disagree. I think that Swordbreaker is the best breaker skill because like, yes, like, it is niche that you get to kill Ryoma for free, but you get to kill Ryoma for free. Like, that's such a huge effect on your run. It means that, like, literally just having your Corrin be a Wyvern for long enough to get Swordbreaker means that you have a, well, I don't want to say 100%, but you have like a 90% chance that you're going to be able to kill Ryoma without troubles. And if you can't kill him, then and if you die, then just reset, because it's going to take 4 turns to do it in all likelihood. So I just think that value, because chapter 25 is such an, like, it's an annoying chapter to calculate, and like, especially for a newcomer. Like, for me, like, I've gotten to the point where I kind of find it fun, because it's where you, towards the late game, chapter 25 and chapter 26 are the only real chapters where, like, you can't just juggernaut through the whole thing, and you're actually encouraged to, like, get your gamer mode on and, like, figure out your player phases, do your dual strikes, and pop off. But if you don't want to deal with that nonsense, just put your Corrin into Wyvern, give him a dual club, and just call it a day, right? Like, chapter 25, the thing that chapter 25 has that you're going to want is probably the Silent Staff. And the Silent Staff isn't even necessary, because there's so many ways to cheese endgame. And the only reason you're going to be using the Silent Staff is if you don't have a plan for endgame. And if you don't have a plan for endgame, oh my god, dude. Why are you trying to get yourself... What you're saying is that you don't have a plan for chapter 25 and you don't have a plan for endgame. And at that point, you're asking to play Conquest on a difficulty that's much harder than it needs to be. So, more power to you, but this list also probably doesn't apply to you then. I would put this into bottom of nice to have, honestly. I think it's so much better that it deserves to be a tier above.
Okay. I won't really argue with that. When you say, like, you don't have a... I think it's a little unfair to people who are coming to the game and don't really... Like, who want to experience it sort of blind, to say, like, oh, you got to look up what you need to do on endgame. But I think it's good advice to say, like, either work out a build that will handle endgame for you, or be aware that you probably want to get the Silent Staff in chapter 25. But if you want that, you don't actually have to play it straight up. You can, like... sing your way to it, basically. Maybe you'll fight like the first room of ninjas in the bottom left, and that's not so hard, and then you just like lunge the Swordmasters out of the way and go to the chest, and you're golden. So you can just do that on the turn you're about to defeat Ryoma. Yeah, Swordbreaker is not the only way you can cheese Ryoma. You can just like use Savage Blow and Poison Strike slowly. He does have like resist status, I believe, which I think halves the damage from those. But you can eventually chip him down if you have enough poison effects.
Savage Blow also has the benefit of being in the Wyvern Lord class line, which is something that you're going to want to do.
Yeah, that's true. And you can also drag Ryoma down to the bottom of the room and then just kill him with your other units through the wall.
With lunge, which also has the added benefit of being...
You cannot lunge him, actually.
Oh, you can't?
Even if you get him to the barrier, you can't lunge.
Oh, you just wait for the 25 turns, I guess?
No. Like, you can't lunge through at all. The wall's only one tile wide, so if you get him up against it, then you can attack over the wall. But you can't lunge either to or from any of those tiles in that center combat chamber.
Huh. So wait, how do you plan on getting him down there then?
If you attack him and then with Corrin and then you move down, he'll follow you.
Oh, okay. Well, I've never bothered trying that because L-Train gave me the blessed suggestion of just going Wyvern, and I've never looked back.
It's a plan that works.
Yep. Yeah, it's just it's something that comes along with. I mean, Corrin, like your Corrin is probably either gonna want to be ninja, Cavalier, or Wyvern, and in any of these situations, you can probably find a way to get yourself into Wyvern, unless you're male Corrin. At that point, unless you're female Corrin, at that point you might be kind of screwed out of Wyvern at least. But, well, actually no, you can just marry Percy if you really really want Wyvern. But yeah, no.
Female Corrin has fast friendship with Camilla.
Oh right, friendship. I forgot. Yeah, you can do that too. Like, there's a lot of ways that you can subvert this. Going into Wyvern does not equal you have to set Wyvern as your talent. Going into
Yes.
Wyvern means that you go into Wyvern for the last few chapters, and that might even be for the best, because that means that you're probably built a build that's based around a class, based around a class where you're not like innately bow weak, so you're gonna have an easier time on endgame against Takumi. So like you dipping into Wyvern, getting Swordbreaker, or just basically. Even, forget the Savage Blow stuff, you just need to have an axe rank against Ryoma. You need to have C rank axes, and Dual Club's probably going to be reliable enough for you to kill it if you have, a not garbage strength stat. But, Swordbreaker, I think, makes it so reliable that I would put it up here.
Yeah. Ryoma probably isn't going to kill you if you do have a Dual Club against him, even if you don't have Swordbreaker, for the record. Mostly going to be fine, but it does make things a lot more reliable.
Next, we move on to Savage Blow. I haven't used this effectively enough to comment on this, so I'm going to have to ask you to talk about it.
I like it a lot. It depends on your style, really. And, whether you want to, totally negate the threat of whatever the enemies have, not even worry about what are, skills or weapons they're carrying, because you're just going to, mow them down on player phase. In which case, you just... you send in someone with Savage Blow, it weakens everyone else. It's easier to kill them all. That's nice. It's a good effect. It's not the most critical thing. I would call it nice to have, and I think it is a high-end nice to have thing. It's a useful skill. It's a useful class. Has a useful. It's got good distribution, and You can even neuter a bunch of bosses just by attacking and killing all of their flunkies around them. And just you can chip down Kotaro in chapter 17 just by sending Camilla and maybe someone else who went through Malig and go kill the ninjas who are next to him or the sword masters. And bam, he lost 40% of his health. Now it's easier to kill him. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. I would put it honestly above the healing skills, and yeah, I think above Dimwasal actually, and maybe above Quixotic.
I don't think we should put it above Quixotic. Because Quixotic is just really cool. But...
It is really cool, but it does suffer from limited distribution
fair enough,
and everything.
Mm-hmm. Now we move on to Trample, and everybody knows Trample. Trample is everybody's best friend in terms of damage stacking. It's on Malignite. It gives you +4 damage against non-mounted enemies, and if you're in Conquest, that means basically every enemy, because enemies don't really have mounts in Conquest aside from Falcon Knights, and at that point you have easier ways of dealing with Kinshi Knights and Falcon Knights than sending your Malignites and your Wyverns and your whatnots at them. Trample is it's a beast for damage stacking. +4 damage can't be understated. Trample is it's exactly what you want it to be, and that's dealing more damage. And I think it's definitely always worthwhile. I mean, if we're putting all the fair skills here, we should probably also put Trample here. I don't actually know whether we put it above the fair skills, because it is more universal, but it's not like you have units that are oh, I want to use lances, and also I want to use swords. For the most part, you're fine with just sticking to one weapon type, right? Even if you have a solid weapon rank in the other type, you're probably fine with sticking with one weapon type. So I think that Trample just ends up being a slightly worse version. I think that the only thing that Trample really has going for it is the fact that it's on a class that's already easy to access in Conquest, and also good.
Interesting. Because this is my nominee for the meta-defining tier. Not at the bottom of it, mind you, but I would put it up there. Because it's a +5 that, as you mentioned in Conquest, basically applies against everything. And I think it is nice that it works on multiple weapon types. Because it's already in a great class, but because Trample doesn't depend on the weapon you have, anyone can go through Malig just to get Trample. It's always something that I'm thinking about. Can I spare the time and the resources to get this person through Malig, just for +5?
Wait a second, it's +5?
Yeah, it's +5.
Okay, you know what? I take back all of my things. Okay, I think it belongs to meta defining then.
Yeah, it's basically a weapon fair that doesn't depend on your weapon type, but it doesn't work against mounted enemies. So in Conquest, as you mentioned, that's the Falcon Knights, the Kinshi Knights, and the Mechanists.
And the occasional, there's occasional paladins, but they're on like chapter 18 around that point, and it's not really, so it doesn't really end up mattering.
Yes, yes, there are, and that's actually the last main story map that has paladins or bow knights or great knights, I believe, other than Endgame. Endgame has paladins and malignants. So most of the time it works against everything. It's +5 damage. It's on an amazing class. It's on a class that is so amazing that sometimes I actually consider just like early promoting someone like Baruka into Malig, just because I know that she'll get Trample later on, and either that will help her out or she can pass it down to a kid earlier than they probably should have access to it. Like if Baruka's getting married off, she's probably getting her S support around chapter 18 or so. Like if it's with Kaze, for example, 18 or 19, somewhere around there. You can delay for a map or two, and if you promote at level 11 or like level 13 or below, then you can feasibly get to level 15 promoted by the end of chapter 20, or maybe like in a paralogue right after it. So you can get Trample on a first gen unit, and you can get it on like a second gen unit who's got like full auto levels and didn't skip any levels.
And also isn't in a class that splits their magic and strength.
Yeah, and it applies to whatever weapon type, so like you can pass Trample to any kid and they're gonna be able to use it.
Yeah, it's kind of like Elbow Room, except on crack, but also later in the game.
Mm-hmm. And it should be said that it comes on Camilla, who has that super low internal level, because she acts as if she's promoted at level 10 or 11, so her internal level is 15. And the way that works is her displayed level is added to her internal level. So she starts out gaining XP in Conquest like a level 16 unit, and then when she's like she's trying to reach level 15 promoted, she's effectively, so she's at level 14, she's effectively level 24, or sorry, level 29.
Yeah, it's like on chapter 10 she's going to get absolutely nothing. On chapter 10 on chapter 11 she's going to get like 2 to 3 EXP. On chapter 12 she's going to get like 7 to 8 EXP per kill, and you're like, what is this EXP curve?
Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden she just gains XP faster than everyone else for the rest of the game.
I don't know about faster than everyone else, but definitely on par.
Yeah, like around chapter 17 is where she tends to break through, because you're promoting other units as well. You should have pretty much your entire army promoted by then, but they'll have promoted at a much higher level. So relative to their actual levels,
I actually usually have like Camilla around like level 13 by then, to the point where she doesn't even gain too much XP.
Well, that's because she's already gained so much. But
yeah,
yes. So it's a fantastic skill. It can be applied to many units. Many characters want to go through the Wyvern tree, independently of the fact that Trample's there. But because Trample's there, it's a very big incentive to go through Malig. It can be handed over to kids. You can get access to this by marriage or friendship across a huge portion of the cast. You can stack it with other damage boosting skills, so you can take your like Elbow Room and Stronger Post and put Trample on top, or if you've got like Axefaire in your natural skill set, you can go get Trample as well, very comfortably, because it's another Axe class. It's just
it also comes with Strength +2, which is another skill that stacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So it has great synergy with all the things you want to do in a combat build in Fates. And it's so strong relative to other options and has such broad distribution that I think it really does define the kind of skill that you just absolutely want to go get.
Okay, let's not talk about
I like the fact that it works on mixed offense too. Like, it makes Malig Khorne really good.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I personally think what makes Malig Khorne really good is the fact that Gunter exists, but that's a topic for another day. Let's move on to Vengeance. Vengeance is a skill that is living in a world that has left it behind. Vengeance is an awakening skill that is in Fates, and that's really not good for it, because it doesn't really work for what it is trying to go for. I'm gonna quickly talk about what Awakening Vengeance is, because it's basically the exact same skill but slightly different. Awakening Vengeance is you add half of the amount of damage that you've taken to the damage that you're dealing, and the trigger is skill times 2. In Fates, it's skill times 1.5. That's the only difference. However, what's changed is the fact that Fates Nosferatu doesn't let you trigger skills. And this is on Sorcerer, which is, again, the classic it's Nosferatu. Which means that you now no longer have the ability to increase the amount of damage that you're dealing somewhat reliably when you're low on HP and you're using a weapon that brings your HP back up. So it doesn't really synergize with what it's supposed to synergize with, and it's just like, what do I do now? And the answer is kind of help on Vantage builds, and that's basically about it.
Oh no, it doesn't help on Vantage builds.
Well, I guess yeah, because you have to do it consistently, right?
Yes. If it was still, if the proc rate were high enough to get it all the time, like you can in the late game in Awakening, you can get 50 skill and then have 100% proc rate, then it works great with Vantage. But short of that, then if you're like trying to use vengeance damage to get kills and it doesn't proc, well, you're dead. So that's bad. So it's because the proc rate has been nerfed and the practical skill cap has also been nerfed, although I think technically you can probably get even a higher skill in Fates than you can in Awakening.
That's cap. That's actual cap, because
yeah, that's like messing with post-game stuff. And
that's not I don't believe that for a single second, because Awakening has like 40 skill cap. Awakening has like 50 skill cap minimum. Like it's insane. But anyways, yeah, I just don't think it just doesn't work in the game that it's in.
Yeah, so basically what you can use Vengeance for is just like augmenting your player phase offense.
Which, to be fair, has a little bit of usage because of like stuff like Life Taker. If you're just abandoning Nosferatu, but like why?
Well, it does, but those two things work against each other. So it's like, if you use Life Taker, like you go to Dark Knight after a Sorcerer or something, then you get Vengeance maybe on one attack, and then you kill the thing, and you don't have Vengeance anymore. And it just kind of sucks that it relies on you being at low HP to be effective, because like if you're just doing player phase offense, you basically do just want to be on high health all the time, because that means you have the flexibility to go attack an enemy who may be able to counterattack you. Whereas if you're at like 5 HP left and you're trying to maximize your Vengeance damage, that means you really can't afford to attack anyone who can ever counter you, because if Vengeance doesn't activate, you're dead. So I think it's actually the weakest of the offensive procs in this game.
That right there. Offensive procs. Let's see. There's Dragon Fang, so this has to be below that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm almost tempted to call it bad. Actually,
I'm willing to do it. I just didn't want to be that mean to Vengeance. Whatever. It's not like if it matters. Just go 2 games down the line. It's the most busted skill in the game.
Yeah, it's had its heyday in multiple different settings, and I just don't think this is the one where it works best.
Here is Bowbreaker, or as I like to call it, Make My Life Easy on Chapter 24.
I guess I should amend my statement. Vengeance is not worse than lethality. But...
Oh, right.
Anyway, continue.
Bowbreaker is the skill that you use, and it makes your life easy on Chapter 24. Why? Because it means that you can use Calamity Gate against Kinshis, and you can actually take it easy. This is a real strat, by the way. I used to be the guy that like tried to go through Chapter 24 all like fancy, do flyer stuff, and then I realized that I could just put Leo in the middle of all the enemies in the map, and they would all die, and he would come through at capped level and just kill the enemies. So if the game lets me do some nonsense like that, then I'm gonna take advantage of it. So because like if the game didn't have enemy phase skip, then I would consider not doing it. But it does, so that's a moot point. It's the fact that you can get the Calamity Gate, along with the fact that Bowbreaker means that you're getting rid of one of your main weaknesses. It makes your life a lot easier, because you can you might think that, oh man, you're in Sorcerer, you're not using Nosferatu. Yes, but that's what this bad boy right here is for. You take like slight, so like I don't want to say minimal, but you take damage on enemy phase. You either kill or deal heavy damage to enemies, and then you kill an enemy on player phase, you heal back your health, you do it again. And especially, and this is the reason I'm saying this is good on chapter 24 is because this quite literally covers every matchup on chapter 24, because you don't have to worry about the Oni chieftain's ranges, because they all have like 2 movement. So, and by the time you get to them, you're probably done with all the flyers, and you can just equip a Nosferatu or a Horse Spirit and be fine. I don't think that makes it great. I think that makes it very niche, because bows, like, this is a skill that's not that good, because bow enemies don't have a void. Like, if you consider it outside of that frame, bow enemies don't have void. Bow enemies have a lot of hit, to the point where if you're reducing it by 50, you're still not making their hit rate like garbage on you. So what purpose does it have? And the purpose is not much, so I would just put it with Lanesbreaker.
Yeah, Bowbreaker definitely has interesting synergies with the Calamity Gate in particular, but also other tomes and scrolls in chapter 24 and chapter 25 of Conquest, and on endgame, because it makes some of the mages you might try to use to kill Takumi with lightning are pretty frail, and Bowbreaker helps reduce their chances of getting killed by him if he procs Vengeance. So that's nice. I would honestly say this is sort of in the land between. I don't know. Is it better than Axebreaker?
I don't. I think it's around the same level, actually. Yeah. Now that I think about it, Lanesbreaker is just useless.
It's not. Well, I mean, Lanesbreaker is not useless. It's just not very important for anything you want to do. I think that's a good placement there.
Mm-hmm. And oh god, Seal Magic. I forgot the skill even existed. Seal Magic is the last of the Seal skills, and it is in the world's weirdest place. Seal Magic is this seriously the only Seal skill you get on Northside?
I believe so.
Wow, that's wild. They gave him Seal Magic. Seal Magic is Dark Knight level 5. So you're probably going to see this on Leo, and if you're able to do some stuff with like one of your, like if you have an Odin that's good enough to go into Dark Knight, which don't get me wrong, I've had it happen before. I've had an Odin that's just like scuffed Xander, and that's stupid, but like it happens. Those are the only units you're going to see this on. And Seal Magic it's not that great. Like, Seal Magic is, if there was a tome that gave you, like, if there was a tome accessible in Conquest that just gave you a shit ton of res, but had absolutely no might, and even, like, reduced your magic, then the skill would actually be kind of interesting, because then you could do that, go into Chapter 18 Mage Room, tank all those enemies, they get they get their magic knocked out, and then you swap to a real tome like Brynhildr or Horse Spirit or something like that. Oh, and then you kill all of them without taking much damage. But other than that, like, Seal Magic is basically all of the units you use to have Seal Magic are going to be good enough that you can get them one-rounding. Like, Leo is definitely good enough that he can get one-rounding because of the Horse Spirit, and just having access to like female pair-ups like Felicia, or I mean, I guess that's if you really want to, but also, you know, speed stacking in the form of Rally Speed, Inspiring Song, etc., etc. I just don't think it has much of a use case, and the thing is, if it doesn't apply to this like unique build that I talked about, where you take damage, you bring it back with Life Taker, which I'll talk about a lot more on when you get to Life Taker. So it doesn't even apply to any specific build. I think it's definitely around the Seal Strength tier.
Yeah, pretty much. The main thing I think Seal Magic is useful for is if you want to NOS tank some mages, because you can't really one-round them. So they're going to be... they're going to survive for one turn, and then you'll want to clean them up in the next turn, and it's nice if they deal less damage on that second turn to you. But other than that, like, it's not that effective at very much, and like, it has the same problem Seal Strength has, where most of the time you're just going to go kill the things that survived, so what's the point? And like, even for that scenario, it's kind of out of the way, because you have to go into Dark Knight and then over to Sorcerer to be using that kind of thing. Otherwise, you're pretty much just going to try to get enough speed and magic to just one-round things instead. So it's conceivably useful. I have actually had it work for me on occasion, but like, normally not by having it like normally not by having the Nos and Seal Magic on the same character. It's more like Leo went and like fought a bunch of mages and maybe didn't kill like 3 of them for whatever reason, and then park Odin behind them to clean up or something, while Leo goes off and does something else. But yeah, it's pretty small niche. It's not very useful.
Okay, Life Taker. I'm about to wax poetic right here. So let's talk about the design of the Dark Mage class line real quickly. Dark Mage class line is a class that's kind of odd in terms of stats. It has not much speed. It has a bunch of magic. It has a bunch of res, and it has Dark Tome access, which in the context of Fates means that you get Nosferatu. Nosferatu heals you. It gives you sustain. As the game progresses, your ability to sustain off of Nosferatu becomes less and less. Your stats become more important, and the fact that Nosferatu doesn't let you provide more stats in the form of like hit or and it even gives you negative avoid to the point where like even like axe enemies are gonna always hit you. It becomes a detriment, and it doesn't hit super hard, and it costs a lot to forge it up. It can still work, but it's not the greatest thing in the world. Now you take a look at Leo, right? Leo, he already isn't in Sorcerer, and turning him into a Sorcerer is probably not the best thing to do because your Heart Seals are so in demand in Conquest. There's like at least 10 units in the round that are gonna want Heart Seals. So like giving Heart Seal to Leo just to give him access to Nosferatu in the mid game where it's kind of meh, over somebody else that's gonna want it more, it's just not worth it. But but Leo also is in the weird spot where Dark Knight's stats are just not impactful enough where once you get to the late game where enemy stats are so high, like you're going to be able to consistently put in work with Dark Knight all the time. So, but the Dark Knight also has a good defense growth. So what you can do is you can just have Leo be in Dark Knight until like level 15, turn him into a Sorcerer, and now you can just use your Horse Spirit, your Calamity Gate, your Brynhilder, and just use those. And because the defense you've leveled up and Leo's naturally solid defense, he's going to take some damage, but it's not going to be significant because you can predict your enemy phase matchups, and depending on it, you can use the Sorcerer, you can use the Horse Spirit, you can use the Calamity Gate, you can use the Brynhilder, whatever you want. And then you can survive that, and then kill an enemy, regain most of the health that you just lost, and go back into the cycle again. This is a cycle that you can repeat, and this is something you can do from like chapter 22 all the way up until you hit endgame. And once you hit endgame, I mean, Leo's probably been doing so much work for you if you've been doing this that like you've probably gotten enough use out of him that you don't really need him to put in work. And that's good because he's not going to be putting in work in endgame. I don't think that makes the skill good. I think it makes it kind of useful because it's reliable healing. I would just put it into like nice to have around. I think I would put it around the aptitude area.
Yeah, actually, I pretty much agree with exactly that placement. Life Taker is another one of those skills that ultimately saves you actions on player phase, because a lot of times what you want is you go attack something, you're hurt, you go heal up afterwards, and Life Taker says, okay, I'm just going to go kill something and then heal myself that way. So if I have a reliable kill in sights, then I don't really need the help of any kind of dedicated healer to help me out. And that's nice. I've mentioned before that I prefer to transition later in the game to having these kinds of skills where my characters can sustain themselves a little bit better and they don't need constant babysitting from healers, because healing items are kind of expensive in this game, and I don't think they're that efficient as... I don't think spending time healing is a very efficient use of your player phase, if you can avoid it. But it's a tool that's available to you, and it's not hard to have a couple like staff users on your team, even if you're not like... You may only have one like real healer, but maybe you have like a Falcon Knight or something hanging around.
Yeah, you have like Shigure, Niles, and Felicia, and you probably only use Felicia to heal, but then you also have Shigure and Niles, and you can give them a mend or something, and they can occasionally use it.
Yeah. So you've got some off healing if you need it. So yeah, Life Taker, it makes things nicer to play. Takes some pressure off the rest of your team, but it's not huge. Just decent skill.
This is Life Taker. This is Live to Serve. Sorry,
Yes.
Life Taker. Live to Serve is whenever you heal somebody with a staff, you get healed for the same amount. This is like in the same way that some of these skills are better in other games. I think that Live to Serve is a skill that's better in this game. As we said, healing items are kind of expensive, and it takes action economy. If you are using a healer, you can probably put that healer into a combat class and into a class where they can do somewhat reasonable combat. Again, like the main concept, the main unit I'm going to use to describe this is Felicia, because I use Felicia all the time. You can easily get your Felicia up to level 5 in the prologue, and in the first five chapters, and just have her immediately reclass to strategist whenever you want. And at that point, she's going to be killing mages. However, something you actually find out is that you take a lot of just chip damage in the early game in Conquest. Chapter 6 is not part of this, but Chapter 7 has Savage Blow and Grisly Wing. Chapter 8 doesn't have much of this, but Chapter 9 has Poison Strike Ninjas. Not Chapter 9. Chapter 10 has Poison Strike Ninjas. Chapter 11 also has Poison Strike Ninjas. Chapter 12 has like you see where I'm going with this. There's a decent amount of chip damage, and putting your healer in a spot where they can take chip damage is putting your healer in a spot where they're safe is relatively simple. Putting your healer in a spot where they're safe and they're never going to take chip damage, and to the point where you'll probably be able to use them later on, it's maybe not as simple as you would think it is. It's just a nice skill to have, and it'll help out your healers, and it'll make it so that you don't have to deploy more healers to heal your healers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you keep Jacob or Felicia in the Troubadour tree, this skill is the main reason why they can be your solo healer for the first half of the game, and you don't need anyone else. So in particular, you don't need to keep Elise in Troubadour if you don't want to. And I think that's actually pretty valuable for that spot in the campaign, just to say I only need one staff unit and they're pretty much self-sufficient. So on that basis, I would also call this nice to have. It's certainly not essential for really much of anything, but relatively high on that actually, because I think overall it's more valuable than, probably even more valuable than Renewal, honestly. Which is kind of odd, because I feel like in its 3 houses iteration, where it's just on Mercedes, it's not really important at all, but that's because there's so much free off healing in 3 houses that, like,
and also there's
really
so much more, like there's so many more skills that rely on you managing your HP. Also
true, yeah. But I think given the context in this game, like, it's why you don't need to. It gives you a lot more flexibility, because you can make Elise a much better unit. You can, on the Birthright side, you can reclass Azama and not regret losing a healer because of that.
And this is also important because you don't get too many healers in Fates as well. Like, outside of captures, like if you're playing like female, I've run into this issue in Ironmans. If you're doing female Corrin and you have Jacob and he just turns into a Cavalier, he just turns into a Paladin or a Great Knight, your only healer is Elise. You don't have any other way of fixing up Elise's HP if she gets low. And you really want to turn Elise into a Wyvern because she's pretty good in a Wyvern too. So where are your healers? You have to capture Chapter 9 Shrine Maiden. That's where your healers are. And, I mean, they're not terrible, but, like, oh man, like, Chapter 9 Shrine Maiden is not the healer that you want to be going for. Like, if you want to capture generic healer, you want to capture a strategist from from Sophie's Paralog, Chapter 18, something along those lines. A maid, because they also have S-rank staves for whatever you might need.
Yeah, it helps the offensive staves quite a bit. Yeah. So, I think we pretty much said all there is to say about Live to Serve. Yeah.
Here we come to Tomebreaker, which is, I think, I honestly think that Tomebreaker might actually be the worst of the Breaker skills, because what use do you have for Tomebreaker? Because who's going into Maid or Butler? Because there's not that many units that you want to have in those classes, like outside of meme stuff, like, you know, doing like Maid Charlotte, Maid Effie, stuff like that, which is pretty funny, but also, you know, like, if you're doing that, you know that you've signed up for something that's not entirely optimal, and might even end up hurting your unit. If you're doing stuff like if you're not doing stuff like that, the only units that you're going to be having in these classes are the units that start in these classes. So that's Felicia, Flora, Jacob. Flora is garbage. Like, Flora is, like, straight up, she's a worse generic main. So I feel like we should not talk about her. Jacob is the only unit that I can see even mildly benefiting from Tomebreaker. And at that point, you've kept him as a butler until level 15. And by that point, you could have gotten Trample. By that point, you could have gotten Replicate. By that point, you could have gotten so many of these other insanely busted skills that you get at level 15. But instead, you've gone for Tomebreaker. And what kind of Felicia do you have that she's not already absolutely shattering mages without the need for Tomebreaker already? Felicia's whole thing is that she has insane res, especially if you put her into Strategist. So Tomebreaker is just, like, extremely unnecessary as a skill. I think, like, in theory, it's a nice skill to have, but the class that it's on, combined with the fact that it's so late, it just makes it no.
It definitely does have its applications on Jacob, who, like you said, has more stands to gain more from it than Felicia does. Although I would say that Felicia also does appreciate this. For example, it can really help her out if she's going to be the one to take on the sorcerers at the top of Chapter 18 in Conquest. Because they are... sorcerers do hit pretty hard, and Felicia has, like, solid res, but it's not, like, overwhelmingly powerful.
I mean, she has, as a mage, she has 45% res and 11 res base, and that's at level 1.
Yeah. And the Sorks have, like, what, like 36 attack or something like that, I want to say. Somewhere in that neighborhood.
I mean, as a strategist, she's taking, like, 4 damage, but again, as a maid, this is much more relevant, I see.
Yeah, well, Maid actually has its own advantage because it has Weapon Triangle, and they lose their S rank bonus, so they lose 3 damage from that, and then if she has, like, B shurikens by then they lose another point of damage. So I think, generally speaking, Maids end up with better effective res against sorcerers than strategists do. But usually it works out. Like, when I use Felicia and I, like, actually train her, but I keep her in Maid, or in the Troubadour tree, usually she falls behind in level compared to most of my team, because she's spending more of her time using heal staves and stuff and getting like 3 XP from that in the middle of the game. And she doesn't see a ton of combat because she has a specific niche, and that doesn't come up all the time. But Tomebreaker makes her still viable against those enemies, even if she's under-leveled. So if she's only like level 18 or something, and she's facing effectively level 22, 23 sorcerers, she's gonna take a reasonable amount of damage from them, probably, unless you, like, specifically devote, like, a big res pair up and tonics and stuff. And, like, Tomebreaker makes it so you don't really have to bother with that, because pretty much all the time she'll dodge, like, all but one of the enemies. Mm-hmm. So that's nice. And then for Jacob, it's another thing where if you're taking Jacob 1, probably he shouldn't stay in Butler long enough to get this. I could see it happening, like if you're trying for Elise marriage, so you're trying to get him Wyvern that way, then I would actually consider, like, you probably get that done around chapter... think through it. Well, it's chapter 11 at the earliest.
I'd say chapter 13.
So, and yeah, probably I wouldn't assume that you're getting optimal experience or optimal support point distribution from those two for the beginning chapters. So probably around chapter 13 or 14, and that is the kind of point where he might just stick in Butler and get to Tomebreaker naturally. And it's helpful. I mean, it makes him more effective against mages for sure, and it's a nice thing for him to have. But beyond those two, also if for whatever reason you train one of the servants in the prologue and then you switch Corrin's gender, then they will probably have gained enough levels to come with Tomebreaker when they come back in chapter 15.
Oh right, you can do that. I forgot about that.
Yeah, which is a nice bonus. Like, that means, like, for example, if you get Jacob out after chapter 15, you can actually make him do something useful in chapter 16 immediately because he has Tomebreaker to use against the sorcerers and dark mages on the left side.
And that applies even more so for Felicia because...
Yeah. So there's that. It works out okay for those two, and it's this skill's usability is definitely helped by the fact that it's on two characters who work that way. I would still generally agree that it's one of the weaker breaker skills, but I can honestly say it has helped me more than Axebreaker has. So you may not necessarily agree that it has that.
No. I'm sure it has helped you. I just don't put units. I just have so rarely had units had units that are like stay in mid or butler.
Yeah.
Usually I either insta bench Jacob 2 and I like insta reclass Felicia 1. So it's just like, who do I have that's a maid? But I'm sure that it's useful.
I do think it is undervalued as an early class. Just like having dagger access and having staves and having 6 movement, it's a good package. It doesn't have great stats. Long term, you don't really want to stick with it, but it works pretty well for what you want out of it in the early game.
Okay, this is our last rally skill, which is kind of not saying much considering that it's our second to last skill, like, period. This is Rally Resistance. Rally Resistance, I think it's a nice skill. I think there actually are, I think it has a lot of applications that you wouldn't think. I think it's better than Rally Skill, definitely. Might be better than Rally Magic, probably not better than Rally Luck. Rally Resistance, it's 4 resistance, which is actually a lot when you consider that a lot of units aren't like immediately, like if they go up against a mage, they just wither away. Like even Xander, like I make fun of Xander for absolutely eating shit against mages, but even then, Xander for the most part, he can like take a hit or 2 depending on how much his HP he has, just because of the fact that Paladin actually has like reasonable res. And Rally Resistance, if you stack it with skills that are in the line, such as Demoiselle, Gentilhomme, and Inspiration, which is coming up, it can make a unit that's not necessarily that bulky on the resistance front, a lot more bulky to the point where they can take on mages. And taking on mages is actually pretty important because, like, in the early to mid game, there's a lot of well, there's not so much in the early game because you have a lot of other ways to take care of those mages. But in the mid game, there's a lot of super scary mages, like Mjolnir mages on chapter 18. You know, lightning mages. There's a lightning guy on chapter 18. But then after that, you have stuff like chapter 20, chapter 22, chapter 23, chapter 24, all have mixed classes where if you have a unit that's physically bulky, you're probably also going to want to have at least a decent amount of res on them against like the Basaras, the Oni Chieftain, stuff like that. So I think that it helps out more than you would think that it helps out, considering that res is usually considered to be a not that great stat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you pretty much hit all the points that I want to discuss, which is like, because of the nature of the enemy composition and the way that they kind of, a lot of them pick up, like you see more magic enemies, and also you see more enemies that have magic weapons, even if they're not a class that's like necessarily super magical, like the enemy Oni Chieftains. That Rally Res has a lot of the benefits that Rally Defense does, and I've advocated before that you should consider reclassing the second servant to strategist, and that's a bit more for inspiration than for Rally Res, but Rally Res is a nice bonus, and it's one of those things that does justify the cost of a heart seal almost, just because it almost does. There are a good number of scenarios where it's almost as good as Rally Defense, more places than you might expect.
I mean, also, there's a lot of strategists that you can capture that are just going to end up having it, especially on Sophie's Prologue, if you get it around chapter 19, chapter 20.
Yep, that's an option as well. So yeah, I think, probably above Rally Magic, I think is a pretty good spot for it.
Alright, this is the final skill. Man, it's been a long time. I'm so happy that we've managed to do this. I never thought that this video would ever exist. So, you know what, I'm going to let you do this because it wouldn't have been possible without you. Go ahead, talk about inspiration.
Alright. So I have brought up this topic a few times in this whole discussion, but one of the more powerful support builds you can have is a unit who stacks auras. So that includes Demoiselle or Gentium, or technically you can get both on a kid, and Inspiration, and a couple of the personal auras, like the ones that the Royal Sisters have, all 4 of them. And what else? I feel like there's one more. Oh yeah, Voice of Peace and Malefic Aura. And you can put those things on a character who's doing a support role of some kind, whether that's the kind of thing where you are a strategist, you're staying in strategist, you're just being like a mounted healer who's going around helping out, or even on an offensive unit where the point is they're going to attack first and someone else is going to benefit from their auras on subsequent attacks. And those make a big difference, like much more than you might expect. Like, I don't know when this is going to go out relative to that, but probably this will be after. I am working on a video where I'm going to talk about how you can use auras to beat Chapter 26 of Conquest with much less hassle than I think most people normally experience. It's the kind of thing where you just learn a little bit of, like, you practice your positioning technique just a little bit better, and then you find that you've got all these skills where you're getting like damage taken -4 and damage dealt like +2 or +4, and those things combined with all the other sources that you have to stack both bulk and offensive power, they're really, really effective. So they're not the most important thing if you're like specifically doing an LTC, where you're probably not going to be able to get people in position to use these very well. But overall, like, those auras can be very, very helpful in a lot of scenarios, and I think they're worth it. It's worth investing in a unit who can get a few of them together. Mm-hmm. So Inspiration is by far the most powerful of those because it's just straight +2 damage dealt, -2 damage taken by all allies within 2 spaces. So that's like the defensive benefit of Demoiselle or Gentium, and the offensive benefit of Sakura's personal skill, and the offensive benefit of Hinoka's rallying cry. And I think it's very strong, and it really helps that this skill exists on a couple of characters who can get it really, really early. And that's actually not just Jacob and Felicia. One of the things you can do if you want, although maybe this is stretching the definition of really early, is you can get it on Gunter as well, because he has Jacob friendship. He doesn't have it in his innate set, but you can like stick. You can have Jacob and Gunter work together if you want, but like once Gunter rejoins the team in Conquest. You can't do it in Rev, obviously, because Gunter doesn't support anyone. But it's a kind of neat trick that he has, and Gunter has an internal level of 5, so he gets high-level promoted skills almost as fast as the 2 servants do. And then there are a couple other characters who can also get these. Like, you can recruit a couple kids late who might have them, like a Forest, potentially, or Dwyer, or Jacob's other kid. Oh, I guess he wouldn't have another kid, unless he marries Azura, but Felicia's kid, potentially. So it's got good distribution, it's a really good effect. I think it does demand a little bit more thought because you have to consider your positioning a little bit better, but that's the kind of skill you just want to cultivate in this game. You want to be able to develop the ability to combine all of these different positional effects, like including dual strikes and auras, and I guess those are the 2 main ones. Well, like organizing your team effectively just to use your skills, and I think Inspiration is pretty good. I don't know if honestly, where you put it, I'm kind of okay with that. Like, I maybe quibble one way or the other, but I do think it's a fair representation of the quality of Inspiration to say that it's always worthwhile, and it does have more impact on your playthrough than many of the skills that are already up there. Yeah. I don't think, come to think of it, I don't think it's better than Rally Res.
So you
Or
want
do
Rally
I?
Res
Maybe I do, actually. No, I think it is better than Rally Res. So I think we'll leave it. I would say let's leave it there for now, unless you disagree.
But yeah, I just want to, like, Inspiration is helped out so much by the fact that it's on units that you're going to have, that are like, that you're going to want to reclass, and that are going to benefit from reclassing, and that are going to benefit your team from reclassing, and it just stacks together really well. Like, if you can get, like, if you're able to get Elise to get, like, Inspiration and Rally Res and Demoiselle, like, even though Elise is like a lot better as an offensive unit, like the defensive utility that Elise ends up having is stupid. She makes it so that if she's adjacent to an ally, adjacent to a male ally, that ally is going to take 7 less damage.
Mm-hmm. That was the person I forgot to mention. Yeah, Elise.
Yeah, that's just dumb. 7 less damage. That's so much damage. Like, even on just somebody like Felicia, you can get this, like, I don't know, chapter 14, and you can, chapter 14 at the late, like, and that's stretching it a lot, by the way. You're probably going to get this, like, if you do paralogs a bit earlier, you're probably going to get this around, like, chapter 12, chapter 13, somewhere around there. And at that point, any male ally within 2 spaces will take 4 less damage and deal 2 more damage. And you can make it so that they take 8 less damage against any magical users, because she's going to have rally resistance. These skills, Fates is stat stacking. Like, stat stacking is so prevalent, so useful, so good, so effective in Fates that it ends up becoming stat stacking. And Inspiration is one of the best ways that you can stat stack. And though it's not visible, it's still damn good. And I think that if you're wanting to make your life a lot easier just in any situation, getting one of your servants into strategist is going to make your life a lot easier in terms of planning, because, like, even though, like, you might think, like, even though Zoran was like, yeah, but you have to work on your positioning, not really. You just have to make sure that Xander and whoever else you're using are in range, and that's actually, like, it's easy, but it still helps you develop your positional skills, because you have to still make sure to remember to put those units in that range and do it. So it's not necessarily difficult, but it's still, like, helpful in terms of a, like, player skill developmental perspective. I think that Inspiration is a great skill in Fates, and I think that you would do well to use it. Yeah, that's basically all I have to say.
All right. Well, we're through the marathon finally, and looking over this list, I'm pretty happy with where most of the things ended up. Like I said, I had a couple disagreements with you, but I think we've talked through a lot of them and arrived at some reasonable conclusions for pretty much everything. So
yeah, if there was anything I could change, it would just be like swapping these two, moving Certain Blow up a bit. But honestly, it's like even then, it doesn't change it that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that wraps things up for here. So if you've been watching all 3 of these videos, then I hope you gleaned some useful insights on all these things. And
yeah, if you're from my channel, subscribe to Zoran. If you're from Zoran's channel, don't subscribe to my channel, because it's going to seem really bad in comparison.
Well, everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah. So. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, then leave a like. Again, check out Zoran's channel. I'm going to put it in the description if I don't forget, like I forget most things. And
let us know what you think, because I'll be curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, please. Because aside from you, Gearton, I swear to God, if you tell me to put Seal Resin Always Worthwhile one more time, I'm not gonna ban you, but I'm gonna get really upset at you. But anyways, other than that, if you want to leave your opinions in the comments, I would love to hear them. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.